Hello, I'm Francesca Maxime, and you are watching Arise News Now, your fast forward to stories that affect you. Making headlines all around the world in this half hour. Dozens of people killed when a bomb blast rocks Pakistan. The clock is also ticking toward a government shutdown after the House of Representatives passes a bill delaying key parts of Obamacare. And is the government keeping track of your Facebook friends? A new report says, well, yeah, they are. We have those stories and much more straight ahead. New violence in Pakistan today. A massive car bomb killed at least 40 people and wounded more than 100. It happened some 350 yards from where a memorial service was being held for the victims of last week's church bombing. A car carrying 440 pounds of explosives was detonated by remote control in the city's historic district. 10 shops and several vehicles were also destroyed. Nobody's claimed responsibility for that blast. Also in Pakistan, a major earthquake has left at least 15 people dead. The 6.8 magnitude quake happened in the same province where more than 300 people were killed by an earthquake just on Tuesday. Authorities estimate that some 21,000 houses were destroyed. Unbelievable. Meanwhile, the prime ministers of Pakistan and India are meeting in New York today in a new push for improved relations. Their first face-to-face encounter will take place at the United Nations General Assembly. Pakistan's prime minister says that it is a chance for a new beginning, but his Indian counterpart is actually downplaying expectations. Relations between those two countries have been strained in their 65 years since independence from Britain. Well, there is new fallout today following that historic conversation between President Obama and his Iranian counterpart. Iranian President Hassan Rouhani returned home to cheering supporters and even some egg-pelting protesters. His supporters say the talks with the U.S. underscore Iran's position of strength. The 15-minute phone call was the highest level U.S.-Iranian encounter since before Iran's Islamic Revolution of 1979. Well, Israel has arrested an Iranian-born man accusing him of spying for Tehran. He was carrying photos of various sites, including the U.S. Embassy in Tel Aviv. The Israeli government said today the announcement coming as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu travels to the U.S. to address the United Nations General Assembly and meet with President Obama. Netanyahu has been critical of Iran's efforts to improve relations with the West. Moving on now to Syria, where a government airstrike has hit and killed at least 12 people, most of them students at a high school. Opposition activists say dozens of others were also wounded. The Syrian government has not responded to those allegations. The United Nations says more than 100,000 people, including many civilians, have been killed in Syria's 2-year-old civil war. On Tuesday, international inspectors are due to get their first look at Syria's chemical weapons stockpiles. It's all part of the UN-backed plan to destroy that deadly arsenal. The inspectors will face their tightest deadlines ever and work right in the heart of a war zone. Islamic extremists attacked a college in Nigeria today, gunning down dozens of students and torching classrooms at night. It happened at Yobe State College, an agricultural college in the northeastern part of the country. As many as 50 students were killed there. Moving on to India now, the death toll from the collapse of a residential bank in Mumbai rose to 60 today. Rescuers ended their search operation with all the missing accounted for. According to officials, 22 families were affected by that collapse. One person has been arrested over the incident. In Kenya, people still reeling from the shock of last week's deadly mall attack prayed for peace today. A mass was held earlier today in the capital of Nairobi. It comes as the government there faces questions on whether it received advanced intelligence warnings of the deadly strike. 3 Kenyan newspapers reported Saturday that a number of Kenya's cabinet ministers and defense officials were in fact warned about the possibility that the terror group Al-Shabaab was planning on carrying out a Westgate-style attack a full year beforehand. Gunmen stormed that Nairobi mall. While the warnings were made by the country's National Intelligence Service as part of regular situational reports given to cabinet members and to military intelligence. Greek police have mounted an unprecedented crackdown on the country's far-right party, even arresting its leader and more than a dozen other key members. The arrests of the Golden Dawn Party members are the boldest step yet in the Greek government's efforts to effectively outlaw that party, which has been connected to a series of violent incidents. Staying in Europe now, Portugal's government says that it will not stop its unpopular austerity measures, even if it's a big loser in today's municipal elections. Voters going to the polls on the first nationwide ballot since the center-right coalition took office 2 years ago, weeks after a $105 billion bailout. The voting has no direct bearing on the government, but the ballot is expected to reflect the public mood. The outcome could fuel investor jitters amid growing fears the ailing country may need a second bailout next year. All right, well, a new Miss World was crowned on Saturday, and although she competed as Miss Philippines, she actually hails from the United States. 23-year-old Megan Young moved to the Philippines when she was just 10 years old. She is a college student and an aspiring filmmaker. You're watching Arise News Now. Welcome back to Arise News Now. Well, here in the United States, Congress and President Obama are facing off in another supreme spending shutdown. If they don't agree on a funding bill by the end of tomorrow, much of the government will shut down. On to weather now. Tropical Depression 11 has formed in the central Atlantic. It is currently moving in the northeast, but the storm could be headed for the east by early tomorrow. Now, if the depression becomes a tropical storm, it's going to be called Jerry. Right now, the storm, however, is not a threat to land. Well, on to a new report on the Yarnell fire that killed 19 firefighters in the U.S. It found no indication of negligence or recklessness on the part of those firefighters. A 3-month investigation into the June 30th deaths released Saturday did not determine whether the tragedy was avoidable. However, it did reveal more than a half hour of radio silence that occurred just before the firefighters were overwhelmed by those flames. Despite that issue, the report found that proper procedure was in fact followed. Investigators suggested that the state of Arizona should possibly update its guidelines and look into better tracking technology. So sad. Well, the BP oil spill trial is set to begin its second phase tomorrow. The months-long federal trial is examining how much fault should be placed on BP, formerly British Petroleum, and its contractors for the 2010 Deepwater Horizon explosion. The accident killing 11 rig workers and releasing almost 5 million barrels of oil into the Gulf of Mexico. On to LA now. The jury in the Michael Jackson wrongful death trial will resume its deliberations this week. The 6 women and 6 men have been behind closed doors for more than 7 hours. The suit filed by the superstar's mom claims AEG Live was negligent in hiring Dr. Conrad Murray. He, of course, was later convicted of involuntary manslaughter after giving the singer an overdose of the anesthetic propofol. The jury will then decide if AEG is responsible for Jackson's death. All right, who doesn't have a Facebook account, right? I know a few people that don't, but if you have a Facebook friend that you don't know about, it might actually be the government, not a real person. The New York Times reporting the National Security Agency has actually been collecting mass social media information from Americans since 2010. The NSA has developed sophisticated graphs of social connections based on phone calls and email logs. That policy shift was intended to help the agency discover and track connections between intelligence targets. You're watching Arise News Now. Welcome back to Arise News Now. Well, Illinois state lawmakers are considering a tax benefits plan for one of America's largest corporate farming companies, ADM. Lawmakers don't want agribusiness giant Archer Daniels Midland to move its global headquarters out of the state. ADM has been based in Decatur for more than 4 decades. The company is number 27 on Forbes' Fortune 500 list. Well, BlackBerry reporting a major net loss for its second fiscal quarter as the company is burning up more cash in sales of its newest smartphone. Well, they've all stalled. Revenue for that quarter ended last month was $1.6 billion with a net loss of, get this, $965 million. Well, Siemens is set to shed 15,000 jobs over the next year. A third of those jobs are in Germany. The cut's part of a cost-cutting program. Europe's biggest engineering firm, whose products range from hearing aids to gas turbines, is anxious to close the gap with more profitable rivals. And back in the U.S. now, Bernie Madoff's longtime accountant, 77-year-old Paul Koenigsberg, was busted in charges relating to the $65 million Ponzi scheme. Koenigsberg was charged with allegedly helping Madoff recruit and deceive investors. He was Madoff's most trusted accomplice. All right, here's a little fast food story for you. McDonald's decision to offer healthy options as part of its value meals is part of a growing health-conscious push. And it may be more about looks. We're going to have more about that after the break.